All right, all right, all right. Hey, everybody. Hope you guys are all having a great evening so far. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Adam. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to be with us here tonight. In just a minute, I'll be introducing my co-host, Ben, who you can see on the screen with me. He's one of the top mortgage professionals in the entire country. But tonight's webinar, we've actually updated this over the past few weeks. We've been doing these webinars for over a year, but we realized at the beginning of this year that affordability was one of the biggest challenges right now in 2026. So this webinar tonight is built around just that one big question. How are buyers actually making home ownership affordable in Denver right now? Because with today's prices, interest rates, a lot of nonstop headlines, a lot of people are just wondering and just kind of uncertain about, does buying even make sense right now? And what we keep seeing week after week, it's not usually that buyers can't buy, it's just that they don't have the right strategy. So the strategy we're going to be sharing with you guys tonight are tried and true. They've been proven over the last few months. People are still having success with a lot of this stuff. But before we jump into all of that, just really quick, some housekeeping. You guys might see on the right-hand side of your screen, if you're on a desktop, if you're on your phone or on a mobile, you may or may not be able to use this feature. But if you're on your desktop, on the right side of your screen, you're going to be seeing a chat feature. Feel free to drop questions in there at any point throughout the talk tonight, throughout the webinar. We're going to be trying to give you guys a lot of info. Might be a little bit of feeling like you're getting information through a fire hose. So if it's too much at the moment, just write a question in there, and if we can answer it right then and there, we will. Otherwise, at the end when we have our live Q&A, we'll make sure that we answer those questions first. With all that being said, though, let's just jump right in. So first and foremost, Ben, welcome.
Hey, so excited to be here for another great webinar tonight. And hey, affordability has not gone anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere over the next year. So I always appreciate these conversations and the education that we get to provide, because here's the thing. A lot of people don't realize that there are options out there to make things more affordable, whether it's monthly payment, whether it is down payment assistance, getting closing costs paid for, whatever your concern is when it comes to affordability. And there's several different types of affordability concerns. We have a strategy that we can help resolve that issue.
Love that. Yeah, so we're going to jump into it right now. I'll let Ben share some really, really valuable stuff here in a minute, but I've put together a few slides just to kind of share a little bit of painting the picture of just what we're seeing right now in the industry. So, why this is so important now more than ever to have this proven strategy, because like we said a few minutes ago, affordability has become, without a doubt, the number one challenge for buyers across the country, but especially here in Denver. And a lot of people just aren't realizing that there are still ways to make it work. The market didn't become impossible. It just changed. And the buyers who understand how to adapt are still getting deals done today. Most buyers are either waiting or they're guessing. And that's exactly why they keep missing these opportunities that are right in front of them. You don't have to need to necessarily rush into anything, but you do need a game plan. And that's what's so great about webinars, YouTube, podcasts, just any way that you can just absorb as much knowledge as you can to be ready and in that position whenever it comes to make that correct, educated, correct decision, making sure you have all the pieces of the puzzle in front of you. So, timing doesn't always beat strategy, but confidence always beats guesswork, and preparation is what saves buyers these real, actual dollars. So we're going to, go through all of that here in a little bit. We're going to show you guys the exact strategies that Denver buyers are using to still lower their payments, compete, actually win. And if you guys understand some of the stuff we're going to be talking about, you'll be in a completely different position than 90% of the other buyers out there. So a lot of what we're going to talk about here first is regarding financing. That's what's so great about having Ben on with me tonight. Like I said, he's one of the top lenders in the country. A few just quick things about Ben, just to give him a little bit of a praise before he shares some of the stuff with you guys. Over 22 years of experience, over $300 million in home loans. I think you've helped probably closer to 800 families at this point. Very active real estate investor. Probably my favorite thing on this whole list is just that you practice what you preach. You're an active real estate investor. You've got a pretty awesome portfolio, especially down in the Tucson, Arizona area. And on top of all that, I also co-host a podcast with Ben. So Ben, thank you so much, buddy. Really excited to have you on here again with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. And let me introduce you now. So why listen to Adam? Well, Adam is a 42-year Colorado and Denver native. He recently ranked 5th out of 344 Denver agents in sales volumes. There's a lot of agents right now that are just they're not doing anything. And yes, the market is very difficult. sales numbers are down, but Adam ranked 5th out of 344 agents at his firm. He's also a certified real estate negotiation expert, host of the Living in Denver YouTube channel. And then, as he mentioned, also co-host of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. And thank you once again, Adam, for putting this together tonight.
Thanks, buddy. So first off, you guys, if you just joining us after I gave my little spiel at the beginning, on the right-hand side of the screen, we have a private chat. And in there, feel free to type any questions you have, but just to kind of get a little bit of engagement, if you guys are able to, I know some of you might be on mobile devices today, but if you're able to, feel free just to, in there, just leave us a 1 to 10, just how confident are you feeling right now about buying a home in Denver in the next year or two? You know, you're feeling 1, which means, you know, not confident at all, or you may be closer to a 9 or a 10, you're a really optimistic type person, or are you somewhere in the middle? Just leave us a little comment in the chat so we can see how you guys are doing. And before we jump into what Ben's going to first cover here tonight, I always like just to share a few statistics regarding just what's going on in the market right now. So I had this from our webinar last week. I just kept it in for this one. In late 2025, so last year, we were seeing about $558,000 for the median sales price here in Denver, and that was actually down about 4% from the prior year. Right now, though, it's such an incredible buyer's market. What that means is that buyers have a huge amount of leverage at the moment. And a lot of that just has to do with the ability to have more room for leverage and negotiation because there's so many more sellers than buyers. Time on the market, we're hitting almost 2 months right now, which is significantly longer than it was a few years ago. And inventory is still elevated. There's just a lot of homes that are for sale and not that many buyers that are truly active and engaged and ready to, make offers and actually buy homes. There's a lot of people that are still sitting on the sidelines. So we're going to go through a little bit, this is more depth here in a little bit, but the 3 main strategies we're going to talk about tonight. First, how buyers are lowering their monthly payments. Number 2, some of these hidden opportunities that most buyers are missing. And then the third one, which is what I'm really excited about, is just what's actually working in Denver, but also we're going to share with you guys a few things that are not working. So let's just get started with the first point, which is how buyers are lowering their monthly payments right now. And Ben, I'd love to kind of have you take it from here, and then we'll kind of share some of these slides where you've got a calculator just to talk through some of this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Very, very excited for this. And when it comes to affordability challenges, there's really 3 different types of affordability challenges. Now, tonight, we're going to focus more on the monthly payment, but there is monthly affordability challenges. That's in reference to the monthly payment, where can I afford that monthly payment? Can I afford the rent? Can I afford the mortgage payment or the housing expense? So that is the first type of affordability. The second type of affordability challenge folks might have, especially first-time home buyers, is going to be coming up with a down payment. A lot of people still believe that you need 20% down. It's not true. There are minimum down payment programs out there right now here in Denver, as low as 5 or 3.5% down. There's also reduced down payments, as little as 3% down. And then the bank that I work at, North Point Bank, we were one of the top down payment assistance lenders in the state of Colorado, where we help home buyers get down payment assistance in the form of grants or silent second mortgages, where you could actually get into a property with as little as $1,000 out of pocket. And we have over 20 different minimum down payment, reduced down payment, or down payment assistance options. So there are options if you are someone who is struggling to come up with a down payment. Maybe you have a job, maybe your credit's great, but you just don't have that down payment. That might be something that you want to consider. And then the final affordability piece is in reference to closing costs. At the time of closing, there's going to be closing costs that are due. You're also going to have to pay for your prepaids, your impounds, your homeowner's insurance for 1 year. And there are going to be specific strategies that we're going to use that you don't actually have to pay for any of your closing costs. And there is a way to do that. And what Adam was saying a minute ago is, this is such a strong buyer's market right now. A lot of the headlines are going to be in reference to sales numbers being lower, more inventory, homes sitting on the market for longer. Those headlines can kind of sound scary if you're selling, but if you're a buyer or if you're someone that's interested in buying, that is music to your ears, because it means that you have more leverage. If there's more inventory, if there's more sellers and less buyers, it means you can go find the home that you want. You have the ability to negotiate. You can ask for things like sales price reductions, or for the seller to pay for all of your closing costs, or even do something like an interest rate buy down or a temporary interest rate buy down, which is what we're going to get in here too next. So how are buyers lowering their monthly payment? One of the biggest strategies that we're seeing right now, and I have a closing on Friday where this specific buyer is using the exact strategy that I'm talking about right now, is through permanent rate buy downs and temporary interest rate buy downs. And the way that you do that, when you're writing the offer, you get the seller to essentially pay for that buy down. Now, as an example, in this closing on Friday that's coming up for me, we got the seller to contribute $22,000 so the buyer could buy the interest rate down 3 full percentage points lower in year one as part of a 3-2-1 buy down. And this is kind of an example of right here of what a temporary buy down looks like. So this right here is a temporary buy down calculator that we have here at North Point. And kind of just to give everyone a better idea, this is actually one of the a very similar scenario here. So it gives 3 different options. There's a 3-2-1 buy down option. There's a 2-1 buy down option. And then there's also a 1-0 buy down option as well. So we're going to go into each a little bit more in depth here, just to kind of give you a background on how it works. So this right here is a temporary 1-0 buy down. So how this works is if the note rate was 6.5% in the top left-hand corner there, your loan amount was $500,000. It means that in year one, the interest rate is going to be 1 full percentage point lower than what the note rate would be. So in this example, the note rate is 6.5 in year one. The interest rate for the first 12 months is going to be 5.5. And you'll see that the monthly reduction there is going to be $321 a month. So your principal and interest payment for the first 12 months is going to be $321 less than what it normally would be at the 6.5. Now, to pay for this subsidy is going to be $3,800. So in this example, if a buyer wanted to do this, he would need to get the seller to agree to pay for his buy down for $3,800. And that's something that is very, very doable. Now, you'll see the 2-1 buy down. Here's an example of a 2-1 buy down. So same thing. Note rate is 6.5. Loan amount is $500,000. And in this case, with the interest rate of 6.5 in year one, the reason that's called a 2-1 buy down is because in year one, it's going to be 2 percentage points lower. And then in year two, it's going to be 1 percentage point lower. So in year one there, the interest rate is going to be 4.5%. And the monthly payment reduction is going to be $626. Then after the first 12 months, it's going to go to 5.5%. And the monthly payment reduction is going to be $321 a month before it matures to the 6.5, where the monthly payment for the principal and interest at that point would become $3,607. So at the time of closing, in this example, the seller would contribute up to $11,379 for the buyer's subsidy so they can do this buy down. Let's go over one more example, which is the 3-2-1. And so this is a very, this is not 100% identical to the one that we're closing on Friday, but it's very, very close. So this is a 3-2-1 buy down. So in year one, 3 full percentage points lower. In year two, 2 percentage points lower. In year three, 1 percentage point lower. So year one, the monthly savings is $915 a month. In year two, the monthly savings is $626 a month. In year three, the monthly savings is $321 a month. Now, this number right here might seem really big, or some of you might think it's outrageous, but this is happening right now in this Denver market. Sellers are doing things just like this. Now, you're going to have to ask for it. Your real estate agent may have to negotiate for it, but that $22,000, and here's the other thing, that $22,361, that's the total savings over the first 36 months. And so the seller contributes that amount of money. That $22,000 is then placed in the buyer's escrow account. And this is the reason that I love temporary buy downs, because that $22,000 goes into the buyer's escrow account on the day of closing. It's literally their money. And so if the buyer ever sells the property within the first 36 months, or pays the loan off or refinances the mortgage, whatever the prorated balance is at that time, they would get all of that money back. So let's just say, for example, that um, after the first 12 months, let's just say that interest rates organically came down. The market improved, the Fed reduced interest rates, and interest rates just organically came down. And let's say that there's $12,000 left in that subsidy, for the subsidy in the escrow account, and this customer wants to refinance. Well, they would get that $12,000 back, either in the form of a check or be subtracted straight off of their principal balance on their mortgage. And so when you do a temporary buy down, not only does it allow for significant monthly savings up front, but it's also a way to hedge the market. And you don't have to feel bad if interest rates end up coming down, because you'll get the money back. Whatever is in the account, it's not considered a cost, it's considered a subsidy. So how it works is very different than a permanent rate buy down. A permanent rate buy down is considered a cost. So once if you paid 2 discount points to buy the rate down, on a permanent rate buy down, that's a sunken cost. If interest rates come down, you want to refinance, well, that money's gone. So this right here is a great strategy to reduce the monthly payment. And you can see, I mean, look at that. For year one, the monthly payment on the principal and interest would be $26.92 on a $500,000 mortgage, $29.80 for year two. So this is also a great strategy for folks or for families that maybe want to adjust to becoming a homeowner. They want to ease into that monthly payment. So this is a way in the first 36 months that you can make that monthly payment much more affordable.
Before we sorry, Ben, to interrupt you. Before we move on, just one little thing that I'd like to share with everybody. So you might be seeing that number 22,000 and you're like, man, there's no way I'm going to be able to negotiate the seller giving me $22,000. Well, there's 2 different ways to look at this. Let's just say this $500,000 home, you could put an offer in at $500,000 and maybe get for example, a credit from the seller for $22,000, or you could just negotiate the price of the home down to the same dollar amount. So let's just say instead of $500,000, you offer to buy the home for $480,000.
Okay.
Well, instead of doing that, still having the sales price on paper at $500,000, but then they're contributing that same dollar amount, that $20,000 as this example, as a seller credit, and that credit can then be used for prepaids, which would be paying for this temporary buy down. So, if you're looking at a home on Zillow, or you're out searching for homes with a realtor like myself, and you see a home that, especially right now, maybe it's been on the market for a month or two, that's a pretty big, flag waving in the air saying that there's a good chance that seller is going to take below whatever they're asking.
Yeah.
And this would be an example where instead of that, still offering the full price, but having it as a credit, which is inside of the offer and inside of the contract if they accept it. So not to go down a rabbit hole there, but even a big number like $22,000, that's still very achievable.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because most buyers get a little bit confused on this conversation, where if you ask, would you rather have a sales price reduction? Again, the home's listed at 500,000. Would you rather have a sales price reduction to 480, or would you rather pay 500,000 and then get a $20,000 seller credit? Well, most buyers are going to think that the sales price reduction is the better route to go. And let me just preface that by saying this. I'm not here to make decisions for the folks that I work with. My goal is to explain to them what their options are, so they can then do what they feel is in their best financial interest. So I'm here as a resource. I'm here as a guide. I'm here to provide education. I am not here to make decisions. But the benefit of writing the offer at 500,000 with the $20,000 credit is you actually get that money from the seller on day one. So the seller is actually giving you $20,000. And so you can either put that in your pocket, you can use it for a temporary interest rate buy down. You can also use it to pay for all of your closing costs. But whatever you use it for, it will literally save you $20,000 out of pocket. When you think about a down payment, let's say that you're putting 10% down. The difference between down payment on 500,000, 10% down, or 480,000, 10% down is very small. 10% down on 480 is 48,000. 10% down on 500,000 is 50,000. So the difference is only $2,000. And then when you think about the monthly payment, well, because it's amortized over 30 years, the difference in monthly payment is going to be very, very minimal. So I'm not saying that there's not value in writing an offer at 480. What I am saying though is that most of the time the value on day one is going to be more value by writing the credit, the
Love
500
that.
credit.
Love that. Very well said. We kind of already talked about this, but just again, a few other ways just to really help with getting this dollar amount, asking for concessions. So let's just say that, even if the home is newer on the market, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to get some concessions, whether that be immediately or once you're under contract during the inspection phase. So if you identify some things in the inspection and maybe the seller is not willing to repair the items that you've identified, instead, maybe just giving you a seller credit. That credit can then be used for this. And like Ben was saying, just focusing on the monthly payment, not just the purchase price. And then also definitely comparing multiple loan scenarios before writing an offer. And that's one thing that I love whenever I have clients that work with Ben, is he's really, really good about just providing all these different options and then just making sure that, the best decision is always the one that makes the most sense for you or whoever the client is that he's working with.
Yeah, and let me add one more thing on the seller credit. This is an awesome strategy. So if you're someone that is considering a property that has an HOA, maybe a condo, a townhome, or maybe you're looking at a single family residence as part of a planned unit development that has an HOA fee. Maybe the HOA fee could be as low as $50 a month up to $500 a month. Here's another really impactful, powerful strategy. If you get a seller credit, you can actually use that to pay for the HOA 1 year in advance. So think about that. If your HOA was $300 a month, you can actually use the seller credit to pay for the HOA up to 12 months in advance. So you would not have to pay any HOA dues for the first 12 months. So it's these little strategies, the temporary buy down, using the seller credit to pay for HOA dues, that you can really have a significant impact on that monthly payment.
It's awesome. So the hidden opportunities that most buyers are missing, I love this one. So, we were talking a minute ago about just identifying homes that maybe are sitting on the market. Even at this point, even after 30 days, I think that's a very opportune time to identify those homes too as being ones that you could probably get for below what they're asking for. The sellers are definitely, though, often more flexible on price, concessions, and terms. But what most buyers are skipping just because they assume something is wrong with the house. So when you see a home that's been on the market for a couple months, you might assume that, well, I don't even want to look at that home because there's probably something wrong with it. Don't necessarily count it out. It might just be, again, because of the market that we're in right now. They probably are, though, also still flexible on some of these terms, price point, all that stuff. So very, very realistic, and I think reality for finding some homes that are not only able to get below the asking price, but maybe even that, as well as some concessions. Maybe you get even a little bit of benefit on both ends of this.
Yeah, and let me jump in there again, Adam. Yeah, I mean, it's not just about reducing the sales price and getting a seller credit to pay for the HOA dues or to do one of the temporary interest rate buy down strategies. To your point, if there's an issue with the property, what I'm seeing right now is buyers are able to negotiate with the seller on getting whatever those property characteristics concerns resolved. So here in the last 60 days, I've had a buyer that has got the seller to replace the roof. I have another closing next week where the seller is replacing the entire sewer line. That's like a $30,000 project. I mean, they're digging up the sewer line that connects, that goes into the home out to the street. They're digging that entire thing up and they're replacing that. I have seen homes get repainted. I've had decks get replaced, concrete get worked on. And so there are real opportunities with what Adam is saying. If there is a concern with the property, like using Adam or someone like him who is a certified real estate negotiation expert to get the seller to repair the stuff, like that is happening right now in this market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and here's just a few on this slide, just a few ways that I think if you guys are just maybe at this point, maybe early on in the process, maybe you just like to, look on Zillow at homes, that kind of stuff. These are just a few kind of little indications that these are probably sellers that are motivated, that you have some additional leverage with. So we already talked about just homes that are sitting on the market a bit longer. Oftentimes also when homes start to sit, sellers start feeling like they're just not getting the same level of exposure on sites like Zillow. So they're feeling like they're just really not competing as well anymore. So again, great opportunity there. Anytime you see a price reduction, that's obviously telling you that that seller is motivated. They're motivated enough to lower the price. So that's just a very good indication that that's the one that you might have even more leverage with. And the one that I really like, especially right now, is listings that have come back on the market. These are second chance opportunities. So you see this a lot in the springtime, because what happens is in the fall, oftentimes when you get to the end of the year, really like the start of December, a lot of homes that are still on the market just become, silent, very, very low showing activity. Holidays, just people's minds are in different places than buying a home at that kind of Christmas end of the year time. So they'll take it off the market. And as long as it's off the market, off the MLS for at least 30 days, then they can put it back on. So what will happen is you'll see homes, even on Zillow, you guys can scroll down to the bottom of the screen on a Zillow listing where you can see the price history. And it's just a really easy way to identify if you see that it was listed maybe last year, taken off the market, and then come back on the market. Also be aware of what the price points are, where it was taken off at and where it came back on at. These are, again, really good signals that that person's probably even more motivated at this point, second time around. And then also just homes with really poor marketing. So if you're seeing homes on Zillow with really bad, like cell phone type photos of the interior or very minimal pictures, no video, none of that kind of stuff, that's probably telling you that, that home's not getting the same level of interest that maybe it could be. And maybe the home's fine. They just have maybe hired a poor real estate agent. Maybe they have a family member that just does it on the side and not really fully invested. So, there's a lot of different opportunities if you just kind of know where to look.
Yeah. And then one thing that's great about Adam is that he will actually make those calls to the seller and the listing agent and get the 411 on the property. What's going on? Why has it been sitting for so long? Tell me about your seller's motives. Why are they selling? So he'll find that stuff out and then he'll relay it back to you as a buyer and share the feedback. And then that will allow you to write an offer that's even more competitive. A lot of buyers, when they see some of these things that he's referenced here, sitting on the market for 45 days or price reductions, what Adam said, a lot of times that initial thought can be, what's wrong with this property? But that's the wrong mindset. You want to look at that as an opportunity. Listen, there are literally not enough buyers right now, not only in this Denver market, but this national market. There's 600,000 more homes for sale than there are in buyers. And so in every single market, there are not enough buyers to buy all the homes. So it's not uncommon for homes to be sitting because there's literally not enough buyers to buy all the homes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality of the market. So when something sits for a little bit, you should be thinking this is an opportunity to get that seller credit, to reduce the sales price, to ask for the seller to pay for my closing costs or do a temporary interest rate buy down. The roof looks old. I want to build that into the offer. I want to have the roof replaced. I want to get, I want to use all of that leverage that I have as a buyer and take advantage of it to the fullest opportunity. And sellers can say no. I don't want to mislead anyone. Sellers can say no. They don't have to agree to it. But we're seeing more and more and more of this, where if sellers want to get their home sold, and there's only so many buyers, they're going to have to meet the buyer where they're at. A lot of times what they're asking for in order to sell the property.
Mm-hmm. And we won't go down this rabbit hole right now, but not all the time, but the majority, the time that you make the most money isn't when you sell, it's when you buy. So that's when you have the most opportunity just to get the home at a great price. So you make the most money on the buy, not the sell. So just being kind of aware of that and how that's even another reason why, again, only if it makes sense for each person's situation that they're in. But this is a great opportunity right now. We kind of already went through some of this, but I'll just kind of go through the slide really quick. Just don't assume something is wrong, like Ben was just saying. Instead, just still, schedule a showing, go out and see the home in person, investigate it with your own eyes or with your real estate agent, making sure that, the home isn't necessarily what you're seeing online, just being aware of that, using the inspection and well as just a lot of negotiation to your advantage, looking for sellers, open the credits, repairs, flexible timelines, all that stuff. We have a whole separate webinar that we also host, and we kind of did a transition just because this was so commonly asked and just a big part of questions that we were receiving from our other attendees on past webinars about affordability. So we kind of shifted gears, but we do have another webinar that we do that goes a lot more in depth on structuring a winning offer and how to just really do some of those creative techniques that Ben kind of highlighted a second ago, picking up the phone, learning about the motivation of the seller, all kinds of stuff. So I just bringing this all up just because if you guys are wanting a little bit more clarity on some of that aspect of the real estate right now, make sure you guys just keep an eye out because we're still hosting those. We'll probably have at least one of those in May. So keep your eye out for that. Okay, my favorite part, what's actually working in Denver and what's not. So what used to work, 2019 when it was so nuts, under 3% interest rates. Ben has some stories where he would, host an open house and there'd be literally a line out the door, 10 minutes before it even started, just of people wanting to see the home, multiple offers the first day it hits the market, all that kind of stuff. So back then, coming in over asking price, no contingencies, that was how you won the deal back then. What's working now is much, much different. It's all about these clean, very well structured offers, strong terms, flexibility, some of the negotiation stuff that we've been talking about. It's not necessarily the highest price either. When you're writing an offer on a home, and this is very, very important, not just in 2019, all the time, today especially, is really understanding the motivation of the seller. We go into this in a lot more depth, like I said on that other webinar, but understanding that it's not always the price. There's a lot of people that are going through unfortunate times in their life, whether it be divorce or maybe it's a home where the parents have passed away and the kids are selling it in probate. Lots of stuff going on that might have nothing to do with the price. There's certain sellers that what they're really seeing as the most important for them is just to get the home sold. So understanding this by, picking up the phone, talking to the listing agent, really getting that more in-depth understanding of the scenario, of the motivation of the seller, that is what's working right now. Again, it's not about overpaying, it's about positioning correctly.
Love that.
So again, what's not working anymore, overpaying just to win the deal. I made a comment a minute ago about how you make the most money in real estate on the buy, not on the sell. Some of these people that bought in 2019 and paid over asking, and if they're trying to sell right now, especially right now, since it is a pretty challenging market, they're most likely probably going to be taking a loss. They're not going to see appreciation at this point. They might be selling for less than what they paid for even because they overpaid just to win the deal.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. They might have an interest rate that's a little bit lower, from 21, 22, 23, when interest rates started to go up. But you're right. I remember buyers writing offers $150,000, $200,000 over the asking price just to be able to get into a home. That's how crazy it was. And so you absolutely make your money on the buy. And so if you can position yourself on the buy to set yourself up for long-term success, that is what is most important.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. What is working right now, again, clean, well-structured offers with these strong terms, flexible timelines that match the seller's needs, strategic use of creative solutions in the offer, and just clear communication. So I'll just share with you guys an example that Ben and I are actually both involved in. I have a client that's from out of state that's moving here to Colorado here in a couple weeks, and we're under contract right now, and Ben's helping them with the lending side. And when we placed this offer, we won the offer. We got it under contract because I did exactly what we're talking about here. I picked up the phone, I talked to the listing agent and just got some, a friendly rapport with her going, and just understood a little bit more about what was the motivation of the seller. Well, the seller's got a child that's in school, and they just were really, really wanting to stay in that school until the end of the semester. They're moving out of state once the home sells. So that was really important to the seller. So by me getting that knowledge out of the listing agent, the seller's agent, we were able to write an offer that included what we call a post-closing occupancy agreement. And the way this works is we're actually closing next week on the home, where that seller is going to have all that cash in her bank account from selling her home. But there's a post-closing occupancy agreement that we included in the offer, which allows her to then stay in the home for an additional 2 or 3 weeks as basically a tenant. And she's going to be able to live in that home, the home that she's been living in, for another few weeks, not be rushed to, leave before the school semester is over. And I think probably the biggest part of all this is she then also has all of that money now in her bank account, where when she starts to write a new offer on a home in this other state that she's moving to, she's able to write that offer without it being contingent. Contingent means that you're writing an offer that is subject to something else happening. And this is happening a lot right now, where, for example, I have a listing up in Fort Collins that I'm selling, and I've had a few buyers come to me and they say, well, yeah, we are really interested in this apartment, but my client needs to sell their house first before they can buy this. And then I'll look it up online, and maybe it's only been on the market a couple days. And you saw it takes up to 2 months, sometimes longer, to get these homes sold. That's not a very strong offer. It's that contingency is enough where it's probably not worth us even moving forward and accepting an offer that has that type of contingency. So by her being able to sell and then be able to then not have a contingency on her new offer is really, really important. So, little things like this can really go a long way. And it's not just about that price point of the home, especially if you're trying to get the home for less than that, maybe negotiate some of those credits where you can have a 3-2-1 buy down. You're able to do that now more than ever.
Yeah. And one thing that I want to add there is, I mean, here's the reality when it comes to real estate and lending. Chances are you probably have someone in your family that is either a real estate agent or in the lending mortgage business, because there are that many real estate professionals and mortgage professionals out there. But here's the deal, and listen to this, please listen to this. Are they really professional? Ask yourself that question, because you want to be working with someone who really knows the ins and outs of the market and really is a true professional, that they're not going to be afraid to have those difficult conversations, that they're actually doing business. Adam, what was that statistic that you shared? Like, as far as how, like the average, or it was like 85% of real estate agents closed 1 or 0 deals over the past 18 months or something.
Yeah. It was like 85%.
And so most real estate agents are not closing deals. They're not in the game. They're not negotiating. They're not buying and selling. They're not helping position buyers or work with sellers. And so you want to be able to work with someone that has their reps, that has their thumb on the market's pulse, that really knows the ins and outs of the market. And to be frank, is not afraid to ask for some of the things that we're talking about on this webinar. There are a lot of buyer's agents that if I told you to go ask for a $20,000 seller credit, there are a lot of buyer's agents that just flat out would not have the confidence to do that.
Yeah.
So that's where you want to work with someone that has the confidence to do that, but then can also explain to the seller why they're asking for it and share. You talked about calling the listing agent and getting some of the seller's story, but you'll do the same thing with buyers when you need to. You'll share that. You're not oversharing, but if you're asking for a $20,000 or $30,000 seller credit, you're going to be like, well, this is why. This is what they're looking to accomplish. This is why it's important to them, and you will give the seller some insights on what the buyer is looking to do, which helps increase the likelihood that that's going to get accepted.
Yeah, once you get an offer accepted, that's just the start. You still have a lot of other dates and deadlines. The contract to close phase oftentimes can fall out of contract. I don't know what I apologize. I don't have the statistic in front of me, but I think it was recently, it's a lot higher than normally. I think it's like 25% of homes that get under contract fall out of contract. And I bring this up because it's so important. We don't really talk about this that often in the industry, but just creating a win-win scenario. And this is one of the big topics that Ben and I do on that other webinar that we do, about just understanding that just because me as, for example, the buyer, that doesn't mean that the seller has to lose. Creating a win-win for both parties, where we're going into this contract to close phase, where everybody that's involved feels like they're winning. They're happy with what's, on paper, what the offer and the contract includes. So by going into it with that type of mentality, and where everybody's on a better page, in a better position, when you start having these more difficult conversations later on, like maybe during that inspection, you find the sewer line that has a pretty expensive repair that it needs. It's a lot easier to overcome that and still move forward when everybody is kind of in a better place from day one, just that win-win mentality. I know Ben's really passionate about that too, but I think that's just really, really important to understand. And, it's very possible.
And you got to work with the pros. You got to work with professionals. That's always my my message.
Yep. So before we move on to the live Q&A, so this is just something that I always want to just kind of end with because it's so important. These are just three of the biggest mistakes that we're seeing buyers make. We have had this in our webinar for about the last 3 months because in last year, 2025, these were just coming up over and over again, not just with our clients, but just what I was seeing with, people that were complaining to me about, issues that they were, having with their other agents, and just a lot of stuff that is really important to understand and very easy to not make these mistakes if you just are aware of them. So the first one is just overlooking hidden costs. This is a really big one with first-time home buyers or maybe somebody that just hasn't bought a home in a while. There's a lot of other expenses, a lot of other fees, a lot of other costs associated with buying a home outside of just that purchase price. Ben, why don't you I know you're really in tune with this, is because you're dealing with this all the time with your clients.
Yeah, and this can kind of sound a little intimidating, overlooking the hidden costs. But again, you just want to prepare yourself as you're going into home ownership, especially if you've been renting. If you're already a homeowner and maybe you're talking about selling your existing property and buying a new one, you already know how this works. But for folks, especially folks that rent, a lot of times you're just used to making that monthly rent payment. Well, when you buy a home, more than likely your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance are going to be included in your monthly payment. But then the biggest things outside of the housing expense are just going to be the maintenance. How old is the air conditioning, the HVAC, the furnace, the hot water heater? Usually, and this is something that you've referenced, Adam, as far as you usually want to budget around 1% of whatever the sales price is as an annual budget for maintenance. And sometimes that'll come up semi-consistently throughout the year. In other cases, you may not have any big expenses for a year or two, and then something may break. A couple of years ago, the night before we were supposed to leave on a family vacation, our water heater started leaking and just kind of like exploded at midnight. And I had to go get on the phone and get a water heater out and arrange all of that right before we left for our vacation. So sometimes there can be, it's just a little bit of a different game, but because it's a different game is also why you get the different benefits. You get the ability to leverage an appreciating asset. You get the mortgage interest that's going to be tax deductible. Homes usually appreciate over value longer term. And homeownership is let's face it, homeownership is the #1 investment when it comes to building wealth. When you look at the average net worth of a renter and you compare that to the average net worth of someone who is a homeowner, it's astounding as far as the difference between renting and being a homeowner. So when you're a homeowner for a longer period, that is definitely when it really starts to compound and you really start to build on those gains.
One thing I'll add before moving on is for anybody that's on tonight that's from out of state. So in Colorado, our property taxes can vary from place to place. So there's areas where you might see an annual property tax rate around 0.5%, so about 0.5%. That's pretty common in areas that are pretty established, mature neighborhoods around the Denver metro area. But then if you ever are looking out in more the outskirts, any of these newer communities, master plan communities that are newer. I live in Littleton, which if you guys aren't familiar with Colorado or for Denver, that's kind of on the southwestern side of Denver. And there's an area a little bit further south of me called Sterling Ranch. And this would be an example of one of these areas where it's a newer development, and that same area that the area in Denver that I said was maybe like 0.5, about 0.5% for the annual property tax rate. The Sterling Ranch area, it's at 1.4%. It's almost, it's over double, almost 3 times the property tax of a different part of Denver. So overlooking hidden costs, let's just say you're looking at a few homes early on in the process of, homes that might be a good fit for you. This is an example of this. One home might have a $500,000 home, has in Denver, it's a 0.5%. They're looking at, what is that? That's $2,500 for an annual property tax. That same home in Sterling Ranch, you're looking at $7,000. So some pretty significant differences. One thing also that's really great about Ben is when you do start looking at homes, he'll actually, if you have a couple homes you're looking at, for example, you can send it to him and he'll pull all of this information to show you the actual amount, the exact expectations of what other fees, expenses, HOAs, metro tax districts, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, you'll
Really
hear me
important.
say that I want my buyers to be able to make an informed financial decision. You'll hear me say that over and over and over. And so what I like to do so they can do that is give them the tools and the resources where they can actually make an informed financial decision. So if they're out looking for properties and they're considering writing an offer on the property, well, wouldn't it be nice to know exactly what the financing terms are, what the out of pocket's going to be, what the monthly payment's going to be? And what we'll do is we'll go get a homeowner's insurance estimate. We'll verify the property taxes. We'll look up the HOA dues. We'll pull an interest rate quote in real time. And if we're doing any type of strategy, down payment assistance, permanent rate buy down, temporary interest rate buy down, we'll factor that in. And then we're able to get a very accurate quote to the prospective home buyer before they write an offer. And so that way they can write that offer with confidence. There's nothing more stressful than getting your first home or your dream home accepted, and then finding out that the mortgage payment is going to be $500 or $1,000 higher after it gets accepted. So we want this to be a positive process, and we want to do it the right way, really have that compelling vision for yourself, and then making sure we're taking it one step at a time.
Love that. So this next one, I can speak on it for half an hour on this one, so I'll keep this one very short and sweet, but just really understanding that home inspections are incredibly important, even if it's a brand new home. So even if it's a new construction, a new build home that you're the first person, living in the home, even in that scenario, I still recommend always getting a home inspection. There's a lot of stuff that just comes up, even with brand new homes, that you'd be amazed at. And the kind of point that I'll just share on this one before moving on is that in addition to the regular home inspection, I always recommend for anybody that I'm working with here in Denver that we always add 2 additional inspections to that. And a lot of realtors don't even, present this to their clients, and a lot of people don't even have these done. Whenever I'm selling homes, I'm amazed at how often this never even comes up. And it's such a big one because it's so inexpensive to do these other 2 inspections. So the first one is radon. So again, for anybody that's on tonight from out of state, radon is very, very common here in Denver and in Colorado in general, but it's this odorless gas that can exist in a subfloor. So underneath your base, for example, if your basement is built where there's a crawl space underneath, that area can sometimes create a trapped, kind of isolated environment where this air is stagnant, and this radon gas can get up in there and eventually can even seep into your home and can be harmful. So radon is literally like an $80 inspection to have done, and it basically is very easy. The radon tech comes out, he puts this little device in the lowest area of the livable area of the house, and they leave it there for 48 hours. And then the radon results come back. And if it's above a certain measurement level, it's 4, I forgot the way they measure it, 4 ml. Anyways, if it's above that, then that's saying that it's at risk. And it's a very easy one in an inspection to get either a credit by the seller for, or just to have them pay to have a radon mitigation system installed before you buy the home. This is considered a health and safety related inspection item. And I have a not 100% batting record with these, but pretty dang close when it comes to getting the seller to accommodate, some form of a concession when this type of thing comes up. So that's the first one, radon. And then the other one is a sewer line scope. So in Colorado, if you guys, again, aren't from here yet, in Colorado, we have a lot of, very mature, beautiful trees. And a lot of these trees, as they get older, the roots have a mind of their own and they start creeping any which way. And oftentimes the sewer line, which connects the home out to typically the front of the home in the street where the main line is, that's a line that runs from the house. And if it's an older home, these were often built with clay back in the day, which deteriorate over time. Or even the newer sewer lines, again, with all these roots that start existing with mature trees, can get to the point where they can affect it to a level where it either starts backing up and eventually into the home, or if nothing else, just creates a belly, kind of an area where it's no longer sloping at the correct, slope to get out to that main sewer line. So this is the one that Ben said that he had a client recently that was able to negotiate like $20,000, $30,000 expense. So this one's about 120, 140 bucks to have this sewer line scope done. And I mean, man, in my opinion, that's well worth knowing that you're not having a $30,000 mistake or an issue come up, a month after you buy the home. So very, very cheap, but very, very important to do. Ben, let's have you do the third one. I know you're passionate about this one.
Yeah, this third one here is emotional decision making. This is one of the mistakes that you want to avoid. But before I talk about why you should avoid it, I also want to talk about why it's also important. There is a side of home buying that is emotional, and I think it's very important to recognize that because a lot of times you're buying a home for a reason, and especially if it's going to be a home that you're going to live in or a primary residence. And you can, as you're touring some of these homes, you might be thinking to yourself, you might even be able to envision, this is where my kids are going to run around, or this is a backyard that my dog's going to get to play in. And I think having those visions and those dreams for yourself and your family or your pets, that's very important because that's part of being human. And so there's a part of emotional decision making that you want to embrace, but what you want to avoid is allowing your emotions to make decisions for you. That's why when we get together, we put that financial plan together. What are your goals? What are you looking to accomplish from a monthly payment perspective? How much do you have available for closing? Putting that financial plan together, what that does is it allows you to put boundaries on your roadmap. And when you have boundaries and you know what you're comfortable paying, you know how much resources you have for earnest money and down payment. It allows you to make better decisions. And the mistake that people make is when they let their emotions drive their financial decisioning. And so one story that I always love to share is another story about an open house from a couple of years ago. I was doing an open house, and my role at this open house is I was the greeter, so I was the person at the door that met folks as they were coming in. And I met this man and his wife. They came into the property, and I just asked them, "Are you in the market to buy?" And they're like, "No, no, no. We just live a block or two down. We're just out, enjoying our Sunday walk, and saw the sign, and we thought we'd check out the property." I said, "Great, come on in. I'll introduce you to the agent," and introduced him to the agent. Well, about 15 minutes later, I noticed that they were still there, and they came and got me, and they were talking about wanting to make an offer on the home. And I said, "I just met you like 15 minutes ago, and you said that you're not in the market to buy, and now you want to write an offer on this home?" And then they started talking about how, all the property features and the characteristics and how it'd be perfect. And I was like, "Have you gotten pre-approved?" They're like, "No, no, no. We haven't done anything yet. We weren't." And so all of a sudden there was this huge scramble to try and get pre-approved and put an offer in. And that is really not how you want to go about this. And when someone behaves like that, it opens the door for poor financial decisioning. And it also opens the door for regret as well. So as you're going through this process, it's okay to embrace the positives with some of the emotional decisioning, but you want to avoid allowing that to make your decisioning for you.
Definitely. It's the one that happens a lot. This is a very, very common mistake. So additional strategies for success. First off, just staying flexible, being open to different home types, different neighborhoods. I don't want to keep repeating myself saying that on this other webinar we go really in depth on a lot of this stuff. Talking about different strategies that even just to sit down at the dining room table and talk through with whoever you're going to be living in the new home with, understanding, what's most important to you. Is it the price? Is it the location? Is it the condition of the home? If it's new versus old, being flexible and just being open to kind of looking at what options are out there for you. Definitely consider new construction. There's a lot of great incentives for new builds. A lot of these new build companies are really struggling right now. So they're offering some pretty amazing incentives, especially towards the end of the year. At the end of the year, oftentimes these big building companies, places like Toll Brothers, Lennar, they've got quotas. They've got certain, numbers to meet just for their investors. And, if they need to move a few homes at a little bit lower of a price, sometimes they do that just to, make their numbers work. So just being kind of aware of that. And then planning for the closing costs, just being really aware of all of the different things that go into it outside of just the cost of the home, the price point of the home, excuse me. Just being really aware of that stuff. And then I didn't share this earlier, but just, if you guys are very early on in this process, maybe you've never bought or sold a home before, on this, Ben, on this page here, I have over 2 hours of video where I walk through the entire process from start to finish. So everything from getting pre-approved, how to submit an offer, once you're under contract, what that entails, just everything from A to Z. So if you guys ever want to just dive in a little bit more in depth on that stuff, I'm going to be sharing with you guys an email at the end of this tonight that has a link for that, or you can just go, find me online and check out those videos there. That's really helpful too. And then as well on that email after tonight, I'm going to be sending you guys, you're going to have a bunch of links, a bunch of other things you can dive into, including some really helpful stuff that Ben can share with you guys as well. So just, if you are at that point where you want to potentially, buy a home in the next year or two, all I really want to get at on this slide is just explaining that, even if it is a year or two from now, it's still worth just at least connecting with somebody like Ben early on if you're going to be financing the home. And the reason for that is there's oftentimes little things that are going to come up that you might not really realize, but they could be incredibly important to be aware of, to rectify, to improve upon, to make sure that when that day does come, you're in the best position possible. Ben works with a lot of clients, as an example, that are self-employed. If you're self-employed, there's a few things that you need to make sure you're doing correctly in order to be able to get pre-approved and get a loan. You have to have a certain amount of work history. You have to do certain things a little bit differently. Just being aware of some of these things early on. Another big one is credit. Being able to connect with somebody like Ben, just understand where you're at currently, but also where you maybe need to be in order to get the best possible interest rate, just to be in the best position possible when that day does come. So, even if you're very early on in this process, it's still worth connecting with a few people like Ben and myself, just to at least make sure that you're in the right place and you're educating yourself on whatever you need to maybe do to be, again, in the best position possible.
Yeah.
Ben, anything to add to that?
And I was just going to say, I always recommend, if someone is, even mildly or mediumly interested in purchasing, like, go ahead and get pre-approved. A lot of what I've noticed over the years is a lot of folks have a tendency to disqualify themselves. I don't have the 20% down, or, my credit is in the low 600s. I'm not going to qualify. Hey, listen, a lot of times that's not necessarily true. We have loan programs that you can get down payment assistance on as low as 620. We have tools and resources that help people get their credit up. If you don't have enough saved, again, down payment assistance. You have concerns about the interest rate or the monthly payment, we have options. And so there's not any cost to get pre-approved or to see what your options are. There's also no risk. Lenders, including North Point, we have the ability to do a soft credit pull that doesn't even count as a credit inquiry. And so if you're the least bit interested, just wanting to know what your options are, do I qualify? Are there any first-time homebuyer programs that I might be eligible for? Yeah, there probably are. And we would love to help you vet and see what those options are. So my suggestion is always just to apply, see what your options are. And then again, you can make that informed decision. Wow, I have this down payment assistance option available. I may not need to wait 2 or 3 years. I might be able to do something right now. Or maybe you get pre-approved and you decide that, I think I do want to wait another 6 months. Well, whatever decision you make, at least you can make it with confidence.
So many people are just sitting on the sidelines right now and not doing anything. And when the economy does improve and affordability does ease a little bit, they're just going to be playing they're going to be playing catch up. They're going to either make decisions because they're not educated that maybe aren't the best for them, or they're just not going to be able to act when those great deals do present themselves. So just having that ability to educate yourselves early on and just be a little bit more prepared is so important. That's what we're seeing with all of the clients that we work with that are getting great deals on homes, are really finding, homes that fit what they're looking for. Just really, the top tier of just being happy and, just great, the best customers that we've had, the ones that are really just excited and happy and feel like they got a great deal on a home. Those are the ones that we, realize are the ones that have really put the time and effort in just to this little bit early on in the process, just preparing a little bit more. Sorry, that was a little long-winded way of saying that last sentence there. But with all that, guys, let's just open up to some questions. Again, if you have any questions, you're welcome to type them in the chat. Hopefully we kind of covered everything that we we're trying to do tonight in somewhat clarity. So if you guys have any questions that you want to answer or get answered now, feel free to type them in the chat. But if you don't feel comfortable and you really just want to ask us questions more on a personal level. We always offer these, free strategy sessions. Ben has them himself. I have them myself, or we can always jump on one together, depending on what kind of questions you guys may have. But we just want to make sure that you guys are aware of that it's, no obligation. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're just, here to connect with more people, provide value in any way that we can. And those strategy sessions, those Zoom calls are a great way to do that, where you can ask questions that maybe you don't feel comfortable asking on a public webinar like we are on tonight.
Yeah, if you do have any questions on anything financing related, temporary interest rate buy down related, seller credits, anything else in this housing market, you're welcome to put those in the chat right now. I'm also going to put my digital contact information. Let me just say a couple of things though on some of the down payment assistance options. One thing that's great about Denver is that because we are a higher priced market, and let me back up. A lot of loan programs, first-time home buyer, down payment assistance, other loan programs that offer some type of incentive, usually those are going to be income restricted. And so, if it's minimum down, reduced down, or down payment assistance, those programs can be income restricted. Now, what's great about Denver is that because we are such a high cost market, a lot of the income limits are very, very high. So we have loan programs with income limits where you can still get down payment assistance up to 170, 175, 180,000. And so that, there are a lot of markets where the income limits are less than 100,000. So that is very, very encouraging. I have a question from Alexander here, just asking about interest rates. That is such a great question. At this point, probably not, or at least not significantly. The bank that I work at, North Point Bank, we had our quarterly call last week, and based off of some of the economic forecasts with this Middle East conflict, with what rates have already done, some of the disruption in oil, and how the markets have behaved in response to some of the disruptions there, it's unlikely that rates are going to come down at any point over the next 12 months. Now, it's possible they could come down in a less meaningful way, maybe an eighth or a quarter of a point. The issue with some of the oil stuff is that really impacts consumer pricing concerns and inflation concerns. And so the Fed is in a very tough spot where usually when interest rates come down, that can be a driver to kind of feed inflation. So if inflation is already a concern again, which it's going to be because of some of the things that are happening with these economic disruptions, lowering the rates is going to add fuel to that inflation fire. And so it's unlikely, and the Fed has actually come out and said that rates are unlikely to be reduced here in the last or the next 12 months. And so I'm not anticipating that the Fed is going to reduce rates over the next 12 months. That's also our bank's sentiment as well. Again, though, there are programs, that temporary interest rate buy down program, you can still get an interest rate in the threes in year one. That is what is so awesome about that. And these down payment assistance programs that I'm talking about, they have phenomenal rates. A lot of times the down payment assistance rates are as low or even better than what you could get on a traditional mortgage. So depending on your situation, and this is something else I didn't mention, these down payment assistance loans now allow you to do permanent rate buy downs with the down payment assistance. And so you do have the ability to buy the interest rate down and get down payment assistance, which is a new feature. They just implemented that in the last 6 months here. So some exciting things. On conventional loans, you have the ability to buy out mortgage insurance that you don't on some of the government loan programs. So the reason people ask about interest rates is because it impacts monthly payment. And so what they're really asking when they ask about rates is, how is that going to impact my monthly payment? So if that's a concern, then there are ways to combat that. That's my pleasure.
And the last thing I'll share before we close this one out, unless anybody has any other questions, is just something that Ben shared with me recently on a client that he helped, where Ben, you literally, your clients literally came to the closing a couple weeks ago with $1,000. Just share that with them really quick, just to end it on like an optimistic, positive note, just with how, this is legitimate. This is actually happening still in today's market, despite, higher interest rates. There's still some great opportunities out there.
So when I did the when I did my high trust interview with this client about 2 months ago, we went over the same things that I always go over. You know, what are your goals for monthly payment, and then what do you have available for down payment, and what are you looking for? So in this case, this customer was looking to have as minimal down payment as possible. So we identified a down payment assistance loan program for them. And then we were also able to get the seller to pay for all of their closing costs, all of their prepaids, and everything else. So when they came into closing, the down payment assistance loan paid for all of their down payment. The seller paid for all of the closing costs and prepaids. Their earnest money was $5,000. So they deposited the earnest money when they went under contract. It was $5,000. On the day of closing, they got a check back for $4,000. So their total cash investment for that deal was only $1,000 out of pocket. And that's crazy to say, but that's happening right now in this market. And so if that's a concern of yours, or maybe that's a focus of yours, there is a way to make that happen.
Love that, man. That's very inspiring. Good way to end it.
Let me comment on the deal that we have going on right now with Adam. This was a case where these buyers are not first time home buyers, but they like every buyer, they want to get the best deal that they can. This property was listed for $700,000, and Adam got the seller to reduce the property all the way down to $675,000, and they ended up accepting the offer at $25,000. Less than what they were asking. And you can't always put a blanket over the entire market with some of these stories, but the point that both of us are trying to make is here's the reality. There are more sellers than buyers, which means buyers have leverage. There's more opportunities for buyers. There's more inventory than there has been the last 5 or 10 years. Homes are sitting longer, and so buyers have more opportunity than they've ever had. And so Adam is someone who is going to help you take advantage of that opportunity. He's going to put you in the best position possible to get the best deal possible.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, guys. Well, with that, if you don't have any other questions, just once more from my end, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really, really appreciate your time is very valuable. So we appreciate you guys spending the last hour with us. After tonight's call is over, I'm going to be sending you guys an email recap. It's going to have Ben's info, a few of those other free resources. More than anything else, guys, just feel free to reach out. No question is dumb. No question is, too big or too small. We would just love the opportunity to connect with you guys. So don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out to us, and hopefully we'll see you guys on another webinar. Again, we do these other webinars all about that structuring of the winning offer. So if you guys haven't attended one of those yet, we'd love to see you guys on that one too.
You guys have a great night. Thank you for joining us.